Alright, so 7th period, we're going to go ahead and finish our notes from yesterday. Make sure you have this out on your desk. We're going to go ahead and finish this up. Now, for this video lesson today, if you have any questions, I need you to write it on a piece of paper or write a little question mark. I put a little question mark just like that onto your, can you see that? Right onto your paper. Just go ahead and write that just in case if you have a question as we go through the video today. And then we'll talk about it on Monday. Or you can ask one of the teachers in the room. Okay. Let's go ahead and review. Now, if you didn't number this page yesterday, this is page 32. Today, or yesterday was the 20th. And we just used the same title, Comparing and Ordering Positive Rational Numbers. Now again, if you have any questions when we go through this today, make sure you just kind of hold on to that. Okay, we'll talk about it again on Monday. Monday we'll review. Remember, you have a quiz on Tuesday, and test corrections are due on Monday. Alright, so last part that we left off, anytime you want to compare positive rational numbers, you want to try to make sure that you convert all your fractions into decimals. So that's what I did. Now, if you forgot how to convert, remember, top numbers inside, bottom numbers outside. So let's take 1/4 for example. Let's take 3/4 for example. 3/4, top numbers inside, bottom numbers outside. 3 goes on the inside, 4 goes on the outside. 4 cannot go into 3. But 4 can go into 30. Remember, we had a decimal and we had a trailing 0. So you want to make sure that you kind of see that and how that works. 4 can't go into 3, but it can go to 37 times. 4 times 7 is 28. 30 minus 28 is 2. It didn't terminate, so we had a 0. 4 times 5 gets us exactly 20, and 0 will be that answer. So that's all I did. Then, excuse me. After that, I wrote down all my decimals, and I wrote them in decimal form, and I wrote my fractions as decimals on there. Now, the only thing that we're looking at right now is just the place value. So I'll have my ones place here, my tenths place here, and my hundredths place here. Make sure you are writing along with me because this will count as your notes. We will not go over these notes again on Monday, and I won't rewrite the notes, so make sure you're following along with us. Now, we look at these empty place values and we want to compare them. Anywhere you have a blank, you're going to fill that in with a 0. All you're going to do is fill that in with a 0. Now, I have 0 and 2/10, but now it's like 20 hundredths, 75 hundredths, 80 hundredths, 50 hundredths, 25 hundredths, and 40 hundredths. The way we compare positive rational numbers is we look at each column, see which one's bigger, and we go in whatever order they give us. In this case, they told us to go from least to greatest. So I'm going to look at my first column. If I look at the first column, and we always start with the furthest to the left, and we start comparing. Here's my ones place. They're all 0. Well, if they're all 0, I can't really compare them because they're all the same thing. So we look at the next place value. I look at my tenths. Now I notice right away I have 2 and 2. So 2 of them are the same. Now, because they're the same, we're going to compare them, but now we're going to look at their numbers, or look at their hundredths place. So over here, we have 20 hundredths. Here we have 25. Think about it like 20 and 25, kind of like a regular number. Which one would be my smallest number? 20. So 20 is my smallest number because we want least to greatest. So I look at that number. Well, they gave it to me as 2/10. So I'm going to write it the same way that they give it back. Now, the only reason we convert our fractions to decimals is to compare. We use that to compare, and then we translate it back into a fraction or whatever decimal they gave us, and we write our answer. Just like if we were learning like a foreign language. If everyone in the class spoke a different language and Mr. didn't know how to grade them, I would need everything in English. So everyone would translate and change to English. I would get my answer, and I'd review it. When I give back their work, I would try to get something maybe back in their own language. So I would do my best to try to do that. That's something you want to take into consideration. So 20 and then 25 would be my next one. They give me 25 hundredths as 1/4. And so I write that down. So those two are done. Let's see what our next biggest number is. This is going least to greatest. My next biggest number is 40 hundredths. 40 hundredths is my next one. I'm looking at my tenths place. After 2, my next biggest number is 4. 40 would be next. I got that decimal as 0 and 4 tenths. The next one, after 0 and 4 tenths, would be 50 hundredths. 50 hundredths is the next biggest one, because if I look at just that place value, after 2, after 4, 5 is my next one. And that comes out to be like 1/2. And I mean by 1/2 is because that's what they gave it to me as in my problem. Because remember they wrote it as 1/2, I have to give it back the way they gave it to me. Then, excuse me, now I compare 75 and 80. 75 and 80, well, what's going to be my next smallest number? My next biggest number is going to be 75. And that was given to me as 3/4. And lastly, I have my sixth number, which is 80 hundredths, or 8 tenths is the way they gave it to me. And that's my answer. All you have to do is convert everything into a decimal, compare the place values. It's almost like if we were comparing whole numbers. So if I were to compare whole numbers, for example, if I had 12, 13, 17, what's my biggest number? 17. We look at the ones place, or I'm sorry, we look at the tenths, we look at the tens place, they're all the same. Then I start to look at the next place value. 7 is the biggest. 2 is the smallest. That's how we compare numbers normally. We're doing the same thing with decimals. Now again, you want to make sure you're listening to the video, and we'll do one of the practice problems below. Make sure that you're reading what's on the paper. It tells you to convert the fractions to a decimal. That's the first thing you need to do. If you forgot how to convert fractions to decimals, look back at our do now from yesterday and go back and look at our notes in our notebook. Another way, let's say you don't like converting all the fractions. Maybe you want to do it another way. Maybe you don't like converting it. Well, you could do it as fractions. Now the thing about fractions is that it takes a little bit more time. So for example, if we take that step by step, it says that we want to order that from least to greatest. Write the decimal as an equivalent fraction. So I want to find a common denominator. So for 35 hundredths, well, I can simplify that to 7 twentieths. And I can get all of them to be almost at least at 60 as my common denominator. Now again, this way is a little bit more difficult, but it's another option for my students that like to use fractions. So finding a common denominator is another way. You can choose either way to do the problem. You can either convert it to decimals and work out and compare, or you can find a common denominator for each of them and compare the fractions. After you compare the fractions, all you have to look at their numerators, order them from least to greatest, and then convert it back to what the numbers were when they gave it to you, leaving you with 1/12, 35 hundredths, and 2/3. Now, yeah, that's a different problem. Okay, it's really whatever you prefer. Personally, I'm going to tell you right now that that is the easiest ways to do it is with decimals. All right, questions can be answered on Monday. All right, I'm going to do one question with you. I'll do one with you, and I want you to try it on your own. All right, the next one. It says order the fractions in order from least to greatest. So we're still doing least to greatest. Now, I'm going to show you how to work it out. Again, make sure you're following along with me. And if you have questions, you're letting me know. Now, when I order these from least to greatest, let me kind of adjust my camera, sorry. Now, we want to still do the same thing. Order from least to greatest, but I'm going to do the easier way. I'm going to convert all our fractions to decimals. This one is actually also easy to do it, converting them all to fractions, but it just makes it a little bit more sense to do it as decimals. Now, I want you to think about it this way. I can't compare a fraction with different denominators. I can't compare a fraction and a decimal. So the only thing I can do is either convert them all to the same denominator, like above, or I can convert them all to decimals. It's whatever works best for you. I'm going to use decimals for this one. Order the fractions and decimals from least to greatest. So first we do is convert our convert our fractions to decimals. Well, I have a decimal here, so we're good to go. 3/5. Well, if you look at the top at our benchmark fractions, we can easily see what 3/5 is. How do we change a fraction to a decimal? Inside out. That means numerator divided by denominator. Can 5 go into 3? No. 5 doesn't go into 3, so we add a decimal and we add a trailing 0. 5 can go into 30 6 times. 5 times 3 is 30. It terminates. So this decimal is 0 and 6 tenths. 0 and 1500ths, that's kind of like the same. It's already a decimal. Now 7 tenths. That's a special kind of fraction because I do have a tenths value in my notebook, or I do have a tenths value in my decimals. But let's say we couldn't figure that out. Some of us can already write that as a decimal. Let's just do inside out just so we can keep practicing. Can 10 go into 7? No. We add a decimal and we keep going. 10 goes into 7 no times, but it goes into 70 7 times. It terminates. I got a 0. So that's 7 tenths. So now we kind of layer them on top of each other. 0 and 85 hundredths. 0 and 6 tenths. 0 and 15 hundredths. And then I got my 0 and 7 tenths. Notice you could write the table like how you did above. If you want to do the grid and kind of organize it that way, you're more than welcome to. For me, I just kind of stick with this. Now I'm going to go ahead and place my trailing zeros. So I'm going to put my trailing zeros just so it's easier to compare. Now that I have my trailing zeros, I can compare by place value. So if I look at that in my ones place, they're all kind of the same. If I check in my tenths place, we'll have 8, 6, 1, and 7. They're all different, so I can at least order those from least to greatest. My smallest, if I think about it, is 15. 15 hundredths. And that's what they gave it to me at, so I can write it just like that. My next one after 15 hundredths would be 60 hundredths. And 60 hundredths came to us as 3/5. So I'm going to give it back as 3/5. Always write it in the way that they give it to you in the problem. You can't just write it the way that we convert it, because we convert it for us to figure it out. You can't write your converted decimal, for any other reason other than to help you compare. When you give your answer, you got to convert it back. So that's 3/5. 15 hundredths we already have. Then my next one would be 70 hundredths, or 7 tenths. And the only one left is 85 hundredths. Now, if you have a question, kind of write it to the side. I didn't understand how Mr. Daniel converted. I do not want to hear on Monday. I do not understand how to I don't understand how to compare and order rational numbers. Okay, I want us to make sure that we're at least a little prepared when we get back together on Monday. All right. So your teacher can pause the video for just a minute. Your teacher can pause the video for letter B, and I want you to try that by yourself. try to take maybe about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, hopefully your teacher paused the video and gave you enough time. I don't want to wait, so hopefully your teacher paused the video. Let's go ahead and review. So check your answer to see if you got the right thing. Order 0 and 4/10, 1/3, and 5/6. And we want to order them from least to greatest. All right, we want to order them from least to greatest. 4/10 is good to go. It's already a decimal. Now 1/3. Well, if I do 1/3 as a decimal, I want to do inside out. Now, you might be able to know that already because we converted that a few times, but if not, it's okay. 3 on the outside, 1 on the inside. 3 can't go into 1, so we add a decimal and add a 0. Three goes into 10 only 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Bring down your 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. I get 1. Anyone notice a pattern? It's repeating. So what I write that as is 0 and 3/10 repeating. So that means it could be 0.3, 0.33, 0.333, so on and so on. Last one, 5/6. Let's do the same thing, inside out. 6 can't go into 5, but it can go into 50. The most number of times, well, 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 8 is 48. We'll take that. 10 minus 8 will get us 2. Does it terminate? No, it does not terminate. We have to keep going. We add a trailing 0. 6 goes into 20 3 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I get 2. Does it terminate? No. We have to keep going. I add a trailing 0. 6 goes into 20 3 times. Wow. I'm noticing a pattern. My 3 is repeating. So it's like 0.83, but just the 3 is repeating. Make sure when you write your decimals with the repeating, just put a bar over the ones that are repeating, not over every single number. Now let's practice that. Let's compare. So that's 0 and 4/10, 0 and 3 and 333 repeating. Then I got 0.83333 repeating. Now, I want to make sure they're the right place values. So for the first one with 4/10, I can add a trailing 0, no problem. Excuse me. But for the next one, I want to, instead of a 0, I'm going to add a 3. Because if I were to continue this decimal, it would be 0.33333, so on and so on. Over here, this is already 0 and 4/10, or 0.4, and it terminated. If it terminated, I have to add a trailing 0. These two are not terminating. They're continuing on and on. So for these, I wouldn't add a trailing 0, but instead I would add whatever number is repeating. Again, if you have a question, put a little question mark on that. We can talk and review that on Monday. But try to push forward. This is our review for today. So, least to greatest, my smallest number is, well, all my tenths are, or all my ones place is the same. I have 33 hundredths. Well, that's 33 hundredths repeating, so that's 1/3. My second one would be 40. That 4/10, or 0 and 4/10. And the next one is 83, which came from our 5/6. Now, if this one gave you a hard time because we had to compare with repeating numbers, that is okay. Even if we didn't use the right repeating number, we still should have been able to put it in the correct order. Take a minute to glue this into your notebook on page 32. All right, your teacher will begin to pass out the notes that we should be starting with today, right now.